CloudSplitter Coffee applauds those who get up and get after it, no matter the conditions. They know that kick-ass coffee and outdoor adventure are the perfect pair. CloudSplitter Coffee is ethically sourced and expertly roasted, keeping you caffeinated, satisfied, and most importantly, outside. Your coffee, just like your wildest backcountry story, should be bold and brag-worthy. Head over to cloudsplittercoffee.com and use the promo code ADK10 to receive a special discount specifically for 46 of 46 podcast listeners. And you'll also like to know that the founder of this company is a winter Adirondack 46er. CloudSplitter Coffee, for the love of the grind. We're up here on top of Mount Marcy, just waiting for the sun to rise. Day 2 of the Northville Placid Trail is in the books. Well, life doesn't get much better than this open ridge walk on Jay Mountain, and we're at the summit of Lower Wolfjaw, our 8th high peak of the day here on the Great Range Traverse. Well, it's 4:30 a.m., heading a big slide today, and it's -4 degrees here at the parking lot. Bushwhacking our way up Green Mountain, and I have to say, the trees are winning this fight today. Well, the sun is shining and the wind is whipping here up on Haystack. Next stop, Saddleback Cliffs. Cock-a-doodle-doo from the summit of Rooster Combe. Scarface might be the most underrated hike in the entire park. 60-mile-an-hour winds up on Hurricane. Very fitting, cruising up the Bald Rock slab here on Bald Mountain. Standing up here on the summit of Catamount Mountain, Iroquois, Mount Van Hovenberg, Skylight, Santanoni. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast. I know I've been gone for a few weeks, but I am back this week with a subject all too familiar for most of you hikers out there, and it is that time of year again. It is April 1st today as I record this episode, and it is now mud season. Dun, dun, dun. Mud season has come. We have survived the winter, even though right now in the ADK it's still very much winter. And as we all know, winter doesn't really go away until May 1st. In my mind, once it's May 1st, then you could say, yes, it's springtime. Great. Now I can focus on seeing green and be annoyed when it snows. Quite frankly, after May 1st, I feel it's annoying when it snows. However, throughout April, I know it's still going to snow. We're still going to get that late season snowstorm. But it is officially mud season. In my mind, mud season is April, May, and then maybe part of June, depending on the year. But this episode this week, I just wanted to have a chat all about mud season and kind of different things to expect when you're out in the woods, different choices that you can make in terms of mud season that might be better options this time of year, and just talk all about that sort of subject. So thanks for tuning back in for another week here on the 4646 podcast. My apologies that I've been gone. I've been away working for the last 5 weeks, with many more weeks still to come. I've been away in Gotham City, but I've been working on a new Batman television show. So anyways, I have actually technically been in Gotham City, which is exciting. But anyways, much more interesting things to talk about are the Adirondack Park, the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, the hiking, the boots, the mud, all these sorts of things. So let's get right into it. So what is mud season? Mud season is basically that shoulder season after winter to springtime. So I guess technically spring, early spring, but it's when, it's when all the snow is melting off the mountains and the snow pack that lines all the trails, because, everyone's hiking the trails, which therefore packs the snow down so that the snow on the trail itself becomes extremely packed and icy. And it's kind of a nasty time of year to hike, quite frankly. It's not enjoyable in my opinion. However, I still go out there because once you start to see the brown dirt on the ground and the green trees and the snow isn't there, it's just like, I got to get in the woods. I got to get on the mountains. But then you start hiking and you start climbing and, you're going to find the snow eventually because, of course, it's colder up top and it takes longer for the snow to melt. So basically, mud season is that shoulder season. And the common narrative, if you will, or the message that the DEC puts out is to leave the high peaks alone for mud season. Stay low, I think, is kind of their slogan. There's probably some sort of rhyme to it, but I don't know what it is. But ultimately, it's, the idea is to stay on lower trails, let the mountains dry out, let the trails dry out, and let nature do what it does as it goes from winter to spring and ultimately to summer, which, as we all know, is the best time of year, even though winter hiking is awesome too. But man, summer, how good is summer? But so pretty much you want to kind of stay on lower trails. That's the message that DEC puts out. Now, to get into that for just a little bit, the trails in the Adirondacks in particular, they're always muddy. I've hiked high peaks in April. I've hiked high peaks in May, June, July, pretty much every month of the year. And they're always muddy. They just are. However, with that in mind, I am a team player, and I'm fine kind of also talking about, maybe chilling out with the high peaks during those months of the year. There's different arguments that can be made. If people are actually climbing in those months of the year, they actually will break up the snow faster. So there is that. But anyways, in general, the message tends to be stay low. And that's fine, because here there's so many things you can do. And it's also a good time of year, this mud season, kind of April, May, and June, part of June, I guess. Is go explore different places, go outside the high peaks, explore some of these smaller mountains. There's 1,000 hiking challenges here that have all great, fantastic mountains you could use, and go climb those, go enjoy those, go see the views, the scenery, the towns, all those sorts of things. So there's so much you can do. And I would also say some years, the DEC continues to say, like, stay off the high peaks until, at some point. But there's been years where they're saying to stay out of the high peaks until July. And to me, that's just not realistic. In my opinion, of course, my opinion is meaningless and it's just one person's opinion. But in my mind, mud season, quote unquote, is April and May. And then come June 1st, it's go time. The winter will be back soon. So we don't have a ton of time here in the 80K to really explore and enjoy the mountains. When they're green, it's pretty much winter 6 months a year. Let's be honest with ourselves. So to me, it's like come June 1st, it's go time. But in general, the thought is let the trails dry out. And I understand that. So there's a lot of things that you can do, though. There's good alternatives. There's smaller peaks, as I mentioned, all those different hiking challenges. You got the Lake Placid 9. You got the Saranac Lake 6. You got the Fulton Chain out in that Old Forge area, which is awesome. And if you've never been to that part of the park, great. It's a great excuse to go explore the Western 80K. There's all sorts of smaller mountains that you can climb because, of course, with the smaller mountains becomes melted snow much faster higher up compared to the high peaks. Whereas, Mount Marcy might have, patches of snow in July, quite frankly. So it's going to take a while for those taller mountains to dry out, which makes perfect sense. It's kind of an obvious observation. But anyways, smaller mountains, it's a great time of year to say, let's do some smaller peaks. I highly recommend the Lake Placid 9. They're all shorter, in nature. They're around the same region as the high peaks. Obviously, they're here in the high peaks region. The mountains are fantastic. They're all kind of a half-day hike. You don't have to plan your whole day around it, and you can get outside. And even on those mountains, though, those smaller mountains, you are going to still experience some snow higher up, depending if it's early April. Whereas come May, especially like mid-May, they're all pretty dried out and muddy. But of course, as I said, it's always muddy here. Kind of depends on the rain situation, but the trails are always muddy. It's always mud season here, so let's stop pretending that it's not. But those are some good alternatives. I highly recommend it. And there's also another option that you could do, which is to go to the southern Adirondacks. The southern 80K, obviously, it is less north than here in the high peaks. So stuff dries out faster down there. And so it's another good excuse to maybe explore a different part of the park. If you're used to coming to the high peaks region, go to the southern 80K, that Northville, Speculator, all that kind of just due south part of the park. Lots of great mountains to choose from there. Again, tons of trails, and the snow melts faster, so you could hit that. There's the Lake George region, which also tons of mountains to climb. So there's a lot of things that you can do in mud season that don't involve the high peaks. that's kind of the main message that I want to portray with this this little episode here today. And on top of that, so you could explore those small mountains, right? But you don't have to only explore mountains. And this is what actually gets me really excited. I like, and I promote on the podcast, this idea that you can have adventure anywhere you live. Some places like here in the 80K, it's very easy to go out and find some outdoors adventure. I get that. However, there's places to explore no matter where you live. There's local parks, there's woods. Sometimes you may have to drive an hour, but sometimes you don't. And especially the more creative you get, the more adventure you can have. If you have lakes, you could take up paddling. Oh man, once you take up the sport of paddling, you buy a kayak or a canoe. Now the amount of outdoor things that you can do totally doubles. And you could start doing things like backpacking trails. Okay, let's say you have this local trail here. You want to connect it with another local trail. Okay, maybe it involves road walking to get between them, but you can turn it into a backpacking trip, and you can camp on public land along the way, and you can create your own adventure that doesn't always involve mountains. And I think this mud season time when we're all coming out of winter and we're ready to be outside in the sun, getting in that vitamin D, like it's a great time of year to try something new. And I do encourage you to try that very, very much. So, but coming back to the 80K, wild card mud season options. In my mind, there's the Northville Placid Trail, which is an awesome time of year to hit that trail. I experienced it personally during this time of year, April into early May, and it's incredible being out there as you witness firsthand winter turning into spring. The rivers melting, the snow melting, the leaves starting to grow on the trees where it's everything's open and kind of brown and gross, and then suddenly it's green and lush, and it's really incredible. And if you are interested in the Northville Placid Trail, I have a whole 8-episode season earlier here on the podcast that you could check out, which is my whole trip through that trail, top to bottom. I definitely recommend checking that out. Also, in my mind, it's the best episode. Those are the best episodes that I've ever done. Shameless plug, but you are listening to the 46 of 46 podcast, so why not steer you in a direction that I think you should go in? But yes, the springtime is an awesome time to hit the Northville Placid Trail, especially when you get there before the bugs. The bugs just take over the woods here in the park. But it's a fun time. It keeps you low. The whole message with the DEC, as I mentioned earlier, is to stay low, let the mountains dry out. Low elevation mountains, smaller peaks. And then also, you don't even have to go up mountains to enjoy the woods. With the Northville Placid Trail, it's a long backpacking trail, but you can section it over. You could do day hikes. They'd be point to point, but you can do day hikes. You can do just single overnights. And, you can have a whole other adventure there. And this is a great time of year to tackle that. I highly recommend it. It's also a time of year where there's not a lot of people doing it. So, getting lean-tos and campsites will be very easy because you likely won't see many people on the trail. If you listen to my podcast on the Northville Placid Trail, I didn't run into a hiker until the very last day. So that's kind of that continues to show, it's a desolate time of year out there, but it's cool. It's exciting. It's neat being out there. However, it is still very much winter, in the mountains. Obviously, as I already mentioned, it's winter up top. You might get to the trail and there's no snow at the bottom, but there sure as hell will be snow at the top. So we have to remember to bring those micro spikes and all that sort of things. But with the Northville Placid Trail, because it's low, the majority of it, the snow might be gone. There's going to be some parts of that trail where you're kind of going up and over some small little hills, but it's a great experience. And most of the snow will be gone. Not yet, because it's still early April and still very much winter here. But in the next couple of weeks, you'll have tons of stretches of trail on that one, especially if you started down south in the southern 80K and went northbound on that trail. I'm pretty sure down there, a large portion of the snow, if not all of it, was probably gone by this point or in the next couple of weeks. So that's awesome. You could check that out here during mud season. And then some other ideas, going with what I said before about kind of creating your own path, your own adventure, your own thing to do. get creative with all these different trails. Like if you take out the map and you start to really look at it, you're like, man, there's so many trails that don't necessarily go, they don't summit mountains, but they go, this goes here and then around here. And then you'll take this trail over around the base of this mountain and you'll go, oh, back to this pond. Oh, then I can hit this trail back to this lake and then circle around. And I just did this giant loop. Or a point to point, if you have two cars, or a point to point, and it's like, wow, you're experiencing different trails here in the ADK that are worth experiencing because they all are, and they all tell their own story. And it's a great excuse to try something different that you might have not thought about before. So, you get out the map, and then you can have so much fun with it, creating your own treks, your own journey. You can create your own backpacking trips. Really, like you could turn it into a long overnight, or hell, you could do a whole week. It's whatever you want to do. But once you get out that map and you start looking, it's like you realize you can stay low and still have quite the adventure without going on top of the mountains. And again, this time of year, this sort of a mud season time of year, the mountains are tough because they're so gross. You have this, it's called snow rot, which is just old rotten snow. It's exactly what it sounds like. And it's kind of annoying, in my opinion, climbing mountains when it's at this time of year. I don't personally enjoy it. Pretty much whenever I'm out there, it's because I think the snow is probably going to be gone, or I think this day, most of the snow will be gone, and I get out there and there's always more snow than I anticipated. But when you're down low and you see that their snow is gone, around town and, in your front yard, you're like, okay, I'm going to get into the woods today. Then you get to the trailhead and you're like, yes, there's no snow. This is awesome. It's going to feel like summer. I've been inside. It's been winter. It's been snow for the last 6 months. Let's see some green. And then, of course, the higher you get, the more snow you'll come across. But yes, it's called rotten snow for a reason. And the trails, again, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, because of the fact that everyone's been hiking on the snow and packing it down all summer, or all winter, it takes a long time for that snow on the trail to melt. It becomes like an ice chute too, because it's so dense, it becomes very icy. So again, you'll need those micro spikes. In my opinion, I have micro spikes in my pack from pretty much September to June. I have micro spikes in my backpack. I don't always pull them out. Sometimes I'm lazy and just don't pull them out. I say, I'll just kind of go slow. And then other times there's no way I could have climbed the mountain, or in particular gotten down the mountain without them. Very important. So as I mentioned earlier too about, mud season being kind of April and May and part of June, but in my mind, come June 1st, I don't consider it mud season anymore. I consider it, okay, it's time to get in those mountains. If I have my micro spikes in my pack from September to June, as I mentioned, that gives you basically July and August that I don't have them in my pack. So again, it's time to explore the mountains, and the summer season is very short-lived here in the park. So that's another reason why I have to always have those with me. And I say, okay, at that point, it's time to get out, no matter what the messaging may be. But again, decide for yourself what you want to do. But also don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to, as I mentioned here, try a different sort of adventure where you're maybe not summiting mountains, but you're using this as a good excuse to try a different path, a different route, or not summit mountains, but make the focus on this trip to be about, the trip in the woods to be about ponds and lakes or camping or just being out there. If you enjoy the journey, the summit isn't as important. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say. And that leads me to my next subject, my next topic, which is continuing with other activities you can do. A great time of year to try some paddling, to take up something new. Whether if you already paddle, I guarantee you don't need to listen to me and you're already out there. But I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this show don't canoe or kayak. It's a great time of year to take up that activity, and you can rent them. I mean, there's a million places around here that you can rent a kayak for the day. Very affordable. You have to be able to get it there with your car. So that's obviously something to take into consideration. But it's a great time of year to explore the waterways of the Adirondacks, and there are a lot of them. You'll be really impressed really quickly with how there's so many differences with hiking and backpacking and climbing mountains, but there's also so many similarities as well in terms of the adventure, how your body feels, how you feel, the views you're seeing. It's like, oh, look at these mountains, but instead of being on the top looking at them, I'm down below, but I'm in the middle of the lake. So I'm getting a completely different perspective than I'm ever used to seeing. Or I'm in the river and it's like, you're in such backcountry, rugged, no man's land when you paddle from this point of this river to this other point of the river. There's so much to do, man. I just want to flip this table here as I podcast because I'm just so psyched up because there's so many things you can do. So let me calm myself back down now. Continue talking about things to do. So other things you can do. You could take up fishing. Actually, fishing season, trout season here in the park opens as I'm recording this podcast. But fishing's a fantastic sport, activity, hobby, whatever you want to call it. It's also a great time of year to indulge in that. And again, you're taking up the waterway portion of the park as opposed to the mountain portion. And then there's also just straight up camping. And when you make camping and just existing in the woods for a day or 2 days, it make that the quote summiting portion of your trip. And when the camping is the focus of it, you can have a lot of fun, a lot of great times. And who doesn't like sleeping in the woods? We all know what lurks in those woods here in the park. You got Bigfoot, you got the nigh wolf, you got some sort of bird creature out in the Santanonis. We know that they're out there. We all know they're there, but it's okay. It doesn't stop us from getting in the woods, right? You may hear some tree knocks and some whoops in the woods, but you're like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll be fine. So camping, don't rule that out. And again, but however, this kind of time of year, camping is kind of like semi-winter camping, semi-not, but it's cold weather camping. I won't necessarily call it winter camping because you can easily here in April and May camp where it's like it's just not winter. But I would say it's cold temperature camping, cold weather camping. But in general, you got to remember to not be fooled by there not being snow at the bottom because there will likely be snow at the top of the mountains here in this April and May shoulder season. And if hiking mountains isn't something that you just have this burning desire that you have to do it, or if you're able to, have your hiking trips be maybe later into the summer, if you're only coming up here once or twice a year and you can, have it during that time, I would definitely recommend doing it later because I think the conditions in the mountains will be better. But again, if this is the only time of year that you're able to come up here and this is what you plan, then you are free to go climb whatever mountain you want. This is state land. There are no rules there. This is more of just kind of guidelines and recommendations and that sort of thing. So again, decide for yourself. I am not here to tell you what to do in any stretch of the imagination, but this is kind of my opinion on the subject and just trying to push you into the right direction and hopefully open your mind to maybe exploring some other options during this time of year. But again, I have climbed mountains every month of the year, so take that for what you will. And so in closing, I'm just going to wrap up this short little episode here. Mud season, basically April, May, maybe part of June. Remember to keep your micro spikes at the least in your backpack until at least June. You might, and at this time of year too. So right now it's April 1st. You still need snowshoes. I mean, it's still winter. There's still tons of snow out there. The more snow is coming. It's more so, I think, May. I mean, April and May are also, while they're both kind of technically shoulder season, mud season, they're drastically different months in terms of the terrain out there. May is way more spring-like. April is more summer-like, but those are more winter-like. Those two, however, they merge into one kind of season. So remember to keep those things. Don't be afraid to try some new adventures, new routes. Don't be afraid to stay low, hike some smaller mountains, maybe take up that hiking challenge that you've been eyeballing for a while, or, piece a few different trails together and make your own backpacking trip. Don't be afraid to explore where you live because I don't guarantee, but I'm willing to bet that where you live is probably a lot more spring-like than it is here in Lake Placid, where it's winter until at least May 1st. And then we'll usually get one more snowstorm the first week of May. you could probably have a really good adventure in the outdoors. Where you live, you have to get creative. You have to explore the local parks, look at some maps, find some trails, find some places you can camp, take up paddling. Maybe it's a great time of year to paddle this one random river that flows through where you live. And you could turn it into a 50-mile trip or a 60-mile trip or a 10-mile trip, whatever you want to do. It's a great time of year to do some different things that don't necessarily involve climbing mountains. But hey, you all listen to this show, so you know that I am quite a softie when it comes to climbing mountains, and I can't get enough of it. So I understand the need and the urge to climb mountains. And if you do, there's so many smaller mountains this time of year that are great to visit, and they're all worth visiting. There's way more than just the high peaks. And I think I do a pretty good job showcasing that here on the podcast. There's a lot more than just the high peaks. So it's a good excuse to check those out this time of year. And on top of that, try some new things, paddling, fishing, camping, do things outdoors that get you outdoors that involve other activities. Ultimately, I think you guys will have a great time here in mud season because there's so much you can still do in the outdoors. You just sometimes have to change what you're going to do and have another path to take, but ultimately you'll have the same joy at the end of the day. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. So thanks again for listening to another edition of the 46 of 46 podcast. Sorry I didn't have a guest. It was just me solo on the microphone, but I appreciate you listening. Check out 46of46.com. I have an ebook there if you're about to try to climb the 46 high peaks. That is a great resource to get you started on the right foot. It has all the information that you will want to know beforehand, and it will help you have a safe and successful journey throughout the 46 high peaks. They are a life-changing group of mountains, and I just want everyone to experience them who want to experience them and to have the greatest time doing it. That's available on 46of46.com. If you like this show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on social media at 46of46 podcast. And that'll do it. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, everybody.